This is Battlefield Hardline. We're on Xbox Series X, taking a look at the game that has now been FPS boosted. So this is the cop spin-off entry in the franchise that aimed to do something a little bit different with the mechanics and try to apply, the Battlefield military formula to a bit of a cop sort of experience. Freeze in the name of the law. That actually worked. Anyways, so the game has now been given an FPS boost, which is kind of interesting because, well, all the other Battlefields seemed to get one last time, but this one was left out of the equation, which I thought was a little bit strange then, but now we've been given it with this last batch and allotment of titles, which is kind of neat. So what we're getting here is the original resolution and quality of the experience. So that is 720p. At now 120 FPS, so it feels incredibly smooth. Like, it really does feel insanely smooth to play. It feels very lifelike and very intense. We do also benefit from auto HDR support, which is kind of nice to have. Obviously, it just adds a little bit of a nice little touch-up to some of the smaller visual elements. And we're starting with the campaign, but we will be switching over to showing off the multiplayer in the near future here. But I thought adding or showing a bit of the story might be a fun way to kind of kick things off and kind of give you context into regards to this regular part of the experience. So, for context, the story is kind of a really generic sort of cliche cop type of thing. You're kind of figuring out some, I'm trying to think of like the best way to describe it without spoiling it in case you do actually, kind of go back and play it. But dirty cops, bad things, drug deals, all those things, right? But it's neat because you're actually not just sort of like killing people. You can actually, sort of go for that angle of basically, as you've been seeing, arresting people and taking them down. You don't have to just kill people all the time, but you can too, right? And there's difficulty options as well. And it's episodic in terms of there's episodes that you kind of play through, if that makes sense. Like, the story's broken down into little episodic chapters, and that's really how the story works. Is that a loading screen for opening the door? Did you see that? But yeah, it's kind of an interesting setup in that regard. At least I thought it was pretty cool what they were trying to do with it. But not great, I really wasn't too blown away by the story. Again, what I said, like, cliche, a bit generic. Really not anything too insanely exciting, story-wise. It's interesting. I mean, if you like Battlefield, you want a cop-based sort of, story game, I guess. This one sort of hits that mark. I don't know. I wasn't blown away by it, but I'm sure. I don't know anybody that really loved this story in this one, but it's fine. It's okay. It's something to play, I guess. But yeah, mostly it's just really cool to be checking out the frame rate boost here, especially after seeing that it didn't get that support initially. And I'm actually surprised I died there. I also want to definitely, mention I have a secondary machine gun thing? Oh my god. Anyways, and I also want to mention that for context, YouTube doesn't display like 120, doesn't support 120 FPS. I can't record at 120, but you should be seeing what I guess you could kind of know it as like a down-sampled high frame rate. It should, kind of look smoother picture-wise, if that makes sense. You can kind of get an idea of the gist there. And mostly just me talking about the experience and everything like that. So, like I always say, if you've seen my other FPS Boost games, the fluidity, the way that you're able to react to the environments, the precision, the, everything like that, the movement back and forth, and the panning and stuff is just insanely improved with FPS Boosts. And getting 120 here is, like, absolutely insane. It really, really feels so smooth. It's crazy. But yeah, the resolution is really, really quite rough in this game. It hasn't aged too well, quite honestly. I think like the character models and stuff is like you know, they're okay, but not anything too crazy. But yeah, it was kind of neat because it came right around the whole, you know, I guess you could say Battlefield 4 era and stuff, and they were trying to, I guess, give Visceral something to do, really, right? Something that they could work on with the Battlefield IP. Try to build the Battlefield IP out a little bit, but I don't think this one really hit the mark for them for what they were hoping for. So, yeah, that's why we obviously haven't seen any continuations of it or anything like that. But I think the concept of doing like the cops versus robbers element is actually kind of fun. Maybe not for the campaign, but for the story element. And with that, as we kind of get our last freeze here, really, I wanted to get everybody arrested. That's disappointing. Let's head into the multiplayer and give that a whirl so that you can see it, you know, kind of how that is reacting to everything that we're doing. So this is the multiplayer portion of the game. Usually we do like conquests, but it's pretty late at night, so there's not too many server options that seem to be available, or at least that are open. So we joined a pretty full deathmatch option. I'd say pretty full as in there's the full amount of players, you know, the 64 player lobby. So yeah, that's kind of how we're going here. But this feels absolutely insanely smooth to play, and it'll give you such an edge in multiplayer when you get the under 20 going on. Just for like movement and precision, it really is just unreal to be playing this game at this frame rate. Like the concept of playing this at 120 was not even something I would have ever thought about playing at that console-wise. Like I assumed I would actually be done, you know, with Battlefield Hardline when I put it down years back, right? But you know, we've done a stream recently, got to do some gameplay of it occasionally. It's weird that I've been brought back for this particular one. Because again, kind of interesting, a little bit different, because it's, you know, it's cops and robbers, right? That's essentially what they're going for here. And I do wonder if the concept would work in a modern time. If it were a smaller Battlefield, I don't know. It's an interesting experiment for its era, and I'm assuming, you know, it just didn't fully catch on for people, but the fact that there's still, you know, decent amounts of lobbies, and you can actually, like, go on some nights and there's lots of lobbies, I think that's sort of a really interesting thing to, you know, kind of think about gameplay-wise. And it's just a different option when it comes to Battlefield in regards to, you know, gameplay, having something different to play, something unique. Mixing it up here, but yeah, the FPS boost on this one is quite a delight to have, really. It does make a big difference, I think, just in terms of being able to move around really smoothly and have a big advantage on players for getting that reaction time down. Yeah, it can smoothly hit people and stuff. Obviously, I can't be able to hit people over a ledge, but it helps out for the hand-to-hand combat and close range and distance and stuff. Oh god, I got shut down again. That sucks. But yeah, it's a neat kind of multiplayer. They got a good amount of different maps set up. You know, some of them are like your traditional kind of warfare-based things in big towns, and some of them are more like you would only see in this type of thing. There's like a bit of a drug bust map. There's some in the city, and they had a little bit of like the Levolution to them. I don't know if it was explicitly called that in this, but, you know, you could, like, kind of, in one map, you could take down a crane, and it would open up a new area to get into a new spot, and, you know, stuff like that. Like, nothing Battlefield 4-like, but kind of a similar concept, because that's what they were kind of pushing with the Battlefield titles at that time. I don't think you'd get this kind of like variation again in the series, just because it takes so many teams to get out a big title nowadays. It's kind of getting a little bit crazy for little smaller projects like this to kind of pop up. Instead, you'd be having multiple teams working on just getting one COD out there. Oh crap, died. That sucks. But yeah, this one definitely some interesting moments to it, and I think you can actually have some fun with it. It's that style of Battlefield that you're very likely familiar with, you know, the bread and butter, the core formula of it. It feels good in that regard. It's just the style of it, I don't know, is necessarily going to be perfect for everyone. But having 120 on here, it feels like a whole different ball game. I know that sounds perhaps strange for some people that haven't experienced it, but you know, 60 FPS compared to 30 feels really good. But then jump up to 120, and it's just smooth, like absolutely insanely smooth, to like the highest degree. And I mean, yeah, the resolution's rough. It's super jagged and everything like that. It's not pretty to look at, but at least it performs so smooth. It's kind of wild, and you're just, you know, kind of looking around a lot easier, seeing the full scope of the world a lot better. It's just kind of wild for your, well, we said that reaction times, but the panning and stuff too. It just allows you to kind of look around the environments, and it's amazing that Frostbite is so seemingly perfectly set up for FPS boost, if you get what I mean. We've had so many titles kind of get this support. And I was kind of wondering, I was like, why wasn't Hardline part of the initial batch there of like the EA titles that got support? It seemed like every other Battlefield game, except for Hardline. And now that it's got it, it kind of snuck in there. I guess maybe it wasn't as big of a priority to them, but I am glad that they actually, you know, took the time to get this one pumped up like that, because it just sort of makes the whole franchise, you know, a lot cleaner option-wise. You can literally play, I think, all of the Xbox One Battlefields at 120, if I'm not mistaken, on Series X. That's kind of really amazing, isn't it? Just the concept of being able to do that is really, really quite cool to me. I'm glad that they were able to, you know, kind of achieve that. And it makes me wonder how far they'll take it in the future if they do, you know, more things with this sort of improvement technology. I think it's really awesome that we can have higher frame rates. I would obviously like a little bit better resolution options too, but I'll take this for now. It's interesting, and a good excuse to kind of revisit this one. I almost wish we could have played on one of the more exciting maps, but at the same time, I do consider this to be sort of an iconic, only in Battlefield Hardline kind of map, if you get what I mean. Like, you wouldn't have this kind of level in another Battlefield. You wouldn't have this kind of, like, low density kind of housing. Like, it's cool because there's a lot of just, you know, sort of small, few roomed houses here, but you can go inside of them. You can go inside, like, the diner, the gas station, everything like that. And it's a cool atmosphere, right? Like, it's a neat vibe and atmosphere. And it feels a little bit more realistic than big, kind of empty buildings that you sort of run by with multi-levels. Every area here has, like, you know, a purpose to it. It houses a different thing, or allows you to move around the map. And again, deathmatch to me is really bland. I like something more progression-based or objective-based. So it was a little disappointing that this was like the only really full mode, because I felt like if I did like a, you know, there was 20, 30 player conquests, but I felt like if I did that, I wasn't properly showing off the full chaos of doing 120 with 64 players and having full smoothness. Like, just thinking how far we've come, that I'm almost like snobby about having 120 now. It's just crazy, because, you know, you'd have like half the player counts on 360. You'd have like 30 FPS. And then we've jumped to double that. We've jumped to, you know, smooth 60. Better and better resolutions over the course of the gen. And now we're jumping the frame rate even more than that. Like 4 times what it was back on the 360 era in only a couple gens. It kind of really excites me to see how much further this tech is going to change down the line, because I can see myself probably having to come back to this game at some point. I don't know if we'll still have players online, but, you know, coming back to this game and being like, now it's even double the frame rate on top of that, or it's got a resolution improvement, and I think that's really interesting to think about how much further they can actually improve stuff. But I don't really have much else to say about Battlefield Hardline. I don't think the story is necessarily too thrilling, but if you want to have some weird fun cops and robbers multiplayer, you know, this is an option for that. I think it actually hits the mark in that regard. And you can actually, during the day and even during the evening, find a number of full 64-player lobbies to jump in and play with. It's by no means a dead game, which to me is surprising, but you know, it's cool. I mean, it's nice to be able to enjoy older titles still and actually play them as if they're kind of in their prime to a degree. Just if you want a lot of map selection, you know, you're not really going to get that unless you wait for it to rotate and stuff, but I don't think that's a big deal. But 120, smooth awesomeness on the hardline.